Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. The first question I have is, you've had a pretty illustrious career, pretty deep. You're currently the CFO of Precision Group. Can you tell us how you got there, a little bit about your career path?
Sure. I'll go at a high level and then we can drill in if you want. But actually in undergrad, was actually in a pre-law program.
Oh, wow.
And my junior year, you could take some electives. And kind of randomly, I took a finance class and just fell in love with it, and ended up getting a dual degree, both in political science and in finance. When I was at Michigan State, I had the opportunity to do an internship at GE, which was really and then start working there in their entry-level training programs. And GE did a really good job about giving people broad exposure to different businesses and a lot of good training. So I spent the first around 12 years of my career at GE. I was an internal auditor for 2 years, had a core FP&A role. Then actually GE was big enough where they actually had their own internal M&A finance team.
Yeah.
So I spent a number of years being the finance person, supporting some of their M&A initiatives, which is
That's neat.
really interesting and kind of fulfilled started a kind of a lifetime love of M&A and transactions, which I think has benefited me later on in my career. After that, I went to HG Supply, which was private equity owned at the time, and was there when they was lucky enough to be there when they did their IPO. So got to observe that process. And then really after that, had a number of roles, both in public and private companies. CFO, FP&A roles, and going into a VP of finance role. So this Precision Aviation is my third CFO role. My prior role at Heritage Distribution was a really great experience. It was a roll-up strategy in the HVAC distribution space.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting ride. We basically, when I joined the business, it had the PE firm had just acquired their first business, which is actually based in Alabama, and it was around 170 million of revenue and about 25 of EBITDA. Over the next 10 months, we essentially grew the business to over 600 million of revenue and close to 80 of EBITDA. So really kind of really grew the business. And was actually the PE firm decided to market the business, and we actually ended up selling it to a company based in Sweden.
Okay. I spent some time in Sweden. Did you get to go?
I went once.
So nice.
They're in Malmo, which is right across from Denmark. So, flew into Copenhagen and got to spend some time with the team there. So it was a really great experience. And
nice.
Then, I joined Precision Aviation in June. They're in the the aviation MRO space.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a business that's always been in Atlanta. David Mass, the owner, has been with it since it was like $1 million business, and now it's $600 million plus, and over 100 million of EBITDA. So really enjoy the team. You're learning a lot about the aircraft MRO space, because it's a pretty interesting business model, and just really kind of working on the team to help grow the business going forward.
That's awesome. And a lot of questions come to my head and kind of sprout off of that journey that you just outlined. So I'm just going to start running through them and we'll hit them. The first thing I guess that comes to mind is, it seems like it's a pretty technical field and also kind of a niche field that you're in. Is there anything specific, skill, technicality that you look, or technical ability that you look for in the people you hire to your team?
Yeah, I was really lucky to inherit a pretty good team, and we're also building the team out as we grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one interesting thing about me is across my career, I've been in a variety of different fields.
Sure.
I've done everything from core manufacturing businesses to financial services to digital advertising to so I think pure distribution like HD Supply and Heritage. So what I've found is in going to different businesses, obviously each one has their own things that are very unique to the business, but I think there are things that are just universal, and especially from a finance perspective about revenue and serving customers, and being smart about how you source your inputs to provide those services and maximize profit and manage FP&A and SG&A and a support base to help the team enable the revenue and growth. So I think from being in different businesses, I think there's a lot of things that are kind of universal. So I think in this business, really the first thing is just kind of getting back to those universal themes around controllership and being a partner of the business and kind of helping finance. Establish a vision for how you can support the business. There are some things, to your point, that are technical in the model for precision aviation. One of the things in the aircraft space is they have what are called cores. So essentially, you can on an airplane, we can take back a used piece of equipment. We'll refurbish it in our site, give them a new one, kind of a refurbished one off the shelf.
Sure.
And there's regulations around how many hours those things can fly and the maintenance schedules. But then we'll take back that core, refurb it. So we've got this kind of core exchange model.
Kind of a self-replenishing inventory.
Yeah. So I think that's the one piece that's relatively. I know. I think also in some automotive spaces they have something similar, but that is the one thing that's relatively unique to the aircraft MRO space that I haven't experienced before.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably kind of hard to find people with that specific experience. So you kind of find the people with those universal skills and then coach them up on what you need to that's specific to that technicality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and luckily there's been. Some people on the team that are pretty long tenured. So right now we've got a good mix of people that are relatively new to the team, kind of bring some outside perspective, having worked there, and then some people who have pretty deep expertise in the business that kind of help, teach the new people and provide that connectivity that kind of really understand the granular details of what's going on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome. And you also you mentioned your CEO for a moment, and you've been a CFO at 3 different places now. How important do you feel like that relationship is with the CEO, and how do you foster that to really be a value-add partner to the CEO and not just come across as maybe a tattletale or a report card provider or something like that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think establishing a good relationship with the CEO is key. One, just to, for the broader organization to make sure, to demonstrate alignment. 2, to usually, what I've found in a lot of these businesses, there's so many different things that you could potentially do and avenues to go. And the more I get on in my career, the more I kind of appreciate it. Instead of trying to do 20 things, 5% of the way, and it's really kind of picking out those 3 or 4 things that you really kind of drive to completion.
Sure.
So I think getting alignment on what are the biggest priorities for the business and what are the things that we really need to focus on. I think having that alignment is key.
Yeah. Is that, when you got to the CFO position, kind of top of the hill for the finance and accounting world, were there certain views or new ways of looking at things that you learned from working hand in hand with the CEOs that they looked at that you didn't consider before, or revelations along the way, big or small?
Well, I think, coming into different, industries. So my first role was a manufacturing, then, distribution space. I think, kind of understanding nuances of the business model and thinking about strategically the dynamics of the industry. I think that's where the CEOs are usually very, very attuned, and coming into a business from the outside is really key to understand those nuances, and one, how your business operates with customers, and then how it also kind of operates in the broader context with competitors. And I think having an appreciation for that just will give you some perspective as you go through the day-to-day.
That's great. And back to your journey as a CFO and getting to that point, what do you think? I feel like it's something I've really wanted to ask, and I haven't asked that many people. What do you think got you, and what was that turning point of you getting that first CFO position? Was it just a buildup of experience, and making yourself more valuable, and then you finally got the shot, or do you feel like there were some certain things you checked that really gave you that shot in the end?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a couple of things about my background is, I think now looking back at the span of my career, I've been able to have a lot of kind of well-rounded experiences, but my path hasn't been the most linear.
Sure.
And I kind of weaved around a little bit, got a lot of experiences, and I think they've added up to a skill set. So for example, like spending some time just doing, because I think a lot of people have a more traditional career where maybe they'll spend 3 or 4 years in public accounting, and then a controller role, and work their way
If I
up,
just know every debit and credit, I'll get there.
And for me, I started off kind of on the FP&A side, and one of the things that I've always been interested in is lifetime learning. So started off, I got my MBA, part-time while I was working.
I did the same.
Then got my CFA. So
it's highly impressive. That's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. So because at that time I was kind of thinking, I was working at GE Capital and was, interested in private equity. I knew that was a mark there. Then relocated down to Atlanta, and actually had a role that was more like a strategy role, or like internal consulting role, which was actually pretty interesting because we would go into businesses that were underperforming and kind of do some analysis around like Salesforce effectiveness and everything.
Sure.
So I think one of those things, what that gave me, some of the M&A and some of those roles is going into situations where I knew little to nothing of kind of coming in, and then being able to kind of dig into the data, dig into meet people, and kind of get up to speed pretty quickly. And then had gone through a series of FP&A roles. Then when I was at Chart Industries, had the opportunity to go into a line, my first one being kind of in a line, financial leadership. And then at the time I actually went, realized one of the things about my skill set is that kind of core accounting, I could obviously follow, but wasn't didn't have a very good mastery of it.
Sure.
So kind of relatively late in my career, I went back, got my master's in accounting, and then sat for the CPA exam.
Sure.
So as I think kind of think back, there are times in my career where I almost thought I was kind of at a dead end, or was going to kind of get pigeonholed, and I think just kind of kept learning and
evolving.
Yeah. And so now I think I've got kind of a broader skill set to call on.
Yeah, I think that to be learned from your path is just don't be afraid to go the non-traditional route and take opportunities as they come. I think that's really impressive. And then the life learning, never stop learning. Get your CPA later if you need to. Get your CFA along the way. I think those are that's a great story, and I think a great lesson. I think a lot of accountants get stuck just, if I master everything about accounting, it'll come, and I think there's more of a journey that CEOs and people looking for CFOs value that sometimes didn't keyed in on. So that's great.
Yeah, I think balancing the tactical and the strategic, and what I've kind of really, appreciate is the marriage of the two, because I think you can't, I think if you try to be strategic without really kind of understanding how the sausage is made, you start going to wrong conclusions. And if you're just, kind of making the sausage without kind of really thinking about, what the overall goals or strategy of the business are, that doesn't work either. So I think it's kind of the people I've, been most impressed with in my career are the ones that can, kind of see, utilize both skill sets. So.
Sure. That's awesome. And to that kind of this whole journey and everything involved in it, you talked a lot about working in both public and private industries, whether it's private equity or a public company. Can you contrast the competing demands and the ones that maybe one had and the other didn't, and what that was like working in those two different companies? And you even talked about going through IPOs. I'd be really curious about that.
Yeah. Well, I would say both are challenging. And I think on the public side, it's obviously that cadence of every quarter having to do your Qs and your Ks, and there's obviously probably a little bit more rigor just around just being an SEC registrant to make sure that you've got the robust processes in place. So I think that has its own set of challenges.
Sure.
On the PE side, I think a lot of stuff is kind of focused on capital structure and managing liquidity, and kind of thinking about positioning the business for a liquidity event. But then the one benefit is sometimes just from a reporting or strategy standpoint, you have a little bit more leeway where you can, kind of take some time and be a little bit more strategic versus having to, obviously reporting in a public company, everything has to be, very,
you work for a bank, it is just,
buttoned up by the end of the quarter. So, you can kind of pick and choose and, have a little bit more flexibility in the private side.
Am I hearing that maybe you prefer the private side, or is there, just because of the flexibility of the business and ability to kind of move how it wants and when it wants?
Yeah, I mean, the other, now that we're talking, the other interesting thing about me, or as I've evolved, is I started off at GE, obviously like a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, and then went to some companies that were also kind of multi-billions. I think over time, I've worked more and more in kind of mid-market, so 200 to $800 or $900 million businesses, and to me, I think that's the sweet spot that I found that I most enjoy. The reason being, I think I think in a bigger company like a multi-billion-dollar company, to me, it's hard to really truly get your head around everything that's going on and on a day-to-day basis. And, really have understand the teams and the dynamics. And if you're in a really small business, then I think the CFO role becomes more of a controller type role.
Sure.
So I think in that kind of mid-market space, to me, is where I really enjoy, where it's big enough where you're able to have a team, you have some resources to really kind of strategize and implement good processes.
Sure.
But it's small enough where you're able to meet the understand truly understand the day-to-day in the business, and have good relationships with the team, the entire team. So that's kind of my sweet spot that I like to kind of stay in.
Operate in. I agree. For me personally, I've worked at some major corporations, and I worked at kind of the mid-level as well, and even some smaller mom and pops. And I really like the mid-level because they're being aggressive, kind of like you said, in the market, trying to grow. But you, as a finance, accounting professional, analyst, there's enough space where you can be nimble and move and do a lot of different things. And I always found that really interesting in those spaces as well. I want to touch on. Oh, go ahead.
And then that also is a good point in terms of one of the things that we've done a lot is acquired family-owned companies, which is great because they're usually well run, a lot of pride of ownership. But a lot of times they're coming from the one nice thing about starting with a G is you get to see like or bigger corporations, you get to see kind of robust scalable processes and kind of best in class. And so I think going into companies that had more flexibility when they're family run and in private, and kind of taking some of those things that are what we consider kind of blocking and tackling in a bigger business and kind of implementing them in a smaller environment, I found usually yields a lot of benefit to the business and overall to the team in terms of simplifying processes, getting good data and reporting. So
yeah, and transitioning from that directly into you have gone through a lot of acquisition. It seems I read about 2 you did recently. I think at Precision, one with the company in I think North Carolina, and some others. So what technologies are really helping you through that, and how do you kind of align that with operations? Shameless plug, I know Planful's helping you along that journey, but I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so we're utilizing Planful for our financial consolidation and reporting, and excited to be at a Planful event and kind of think about the next steps in our journey with utilizing the software.
Sure.
I think ERP, the quality of the ERPs and how the businesses use it, I think is always one of the biggest biggest challenges, and it's always interesting when we hear a lot about AI and a lot of these bigger things, and to me, I think, but then you actually go into a lot of businesses, and their level of sophistication and manual processes is
especially mom and pops.
So I think that's one of the things is just thinking about how to leverage systems and leverage data. So I think we're really thinking about how to that kind of blocking and tackling.
Sure.
Because those are the kind of core building blocks and foundations of reporting and controllership, because you can ingest all that data into a system, but if there's not a lot of consistency and quality and around the underlying data, then putting into a system that's going to process it faster isn't going to yield very good results.
Sure. No matter how you do it. You touched on a topic everyone's talking about, is on everyone's mind with AI. How are you approaching that? How are you all integrating it all in Precision in finance, and maybe not just in finance, but other areas of the business as well?
Yeah. To be honest, we started to use a little bit of in our integration processes to start to leverage AI in terms of when we acquired a new business, to kind of look at their capabilities and their sales and usage of inventory, and kind of understand where there's overlap and synergies between the business. So we've started to use it, but I think we're pretty early on in the journey.
Sure. Do you have a hesitancy about it at all, or are you just being cautiously responsible? Do you have a desire to adopt it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the tools and using cutting edge tools are it definitely can be really, really helpful.
Sure.
But also I think again, for us, I think the biggest bang for the buck is just our kind of basic blocking and tackling, and making sure we've got good underlying processes and reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to wrap up, I know you said the blocking and tackling is huge, making sure you have good standard systems in place to do that. But how, as these emerging technologies, AI or not, AI is definitely the one on the forefront, how do you balance the need to make sure that you're ensuring responsible use and security of them, but also making sure you're not getting left behind with these technologies? Is there any practice or method you like to make sure of that you're practicing to achieve that?
Yeah, well, I think to me the key is, bringing yourself and the team along kind of a journey in terms of, freeing up capacity from doing kind of rote manual tasks. And I think as you improve underlying processes, then it gives you ability to kind of take a step back, be more analytical and kind of execute. One of the things that I've found in some roles, I call it kind of a positive flywheel, in the sense of, I've gone into some businesses where there's a lot of manual processes and or inefficient processes.
Sure.
What you do is you go in and free up, you go through, target some of those processes, improve them. So let's say, in the first 3 months, you improve a couple processes that frees up, 3 days of capacity
Sure.
for a controller or a staff accountant. Then what they can do is, that next month, they can take that 3 extra days of capacity to work on some additional projects.
Yeah.
That might add, it might free up another, half a day or day, and then the next month, you'd have 4 days of capacity. And what I found is, you start to build in this thing where you start to, and I think when people see, the benefits of process improvement, it becomes a motivating factor, and they start to get them thinking about how else can they be more efficient. And I think as you start to get those things that are more efficient, then you free up capacity and also kind of mind space to, instead of just doing more rote tasks, to really kind of think about the higher level controllership. So
Sure.
To me, I think that's the benefit, is if you can use your more automated processes to do automate a lot of the more mundane tasks, that frees up capacity for your business team to really kind of think about, identify outliers and address underlying problems in the business.
Yeah, adding a lot of as much value add as they can.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that brings me to, we're reaching the end, but brings me to what I think is going to exhibit your whole, I'm going to call it your whole holistic view. But you talked about, being a business partner and finding a way to do that. And do you find that feeds into that belief you have? If you can make those processes more efficient, then it gives you more time to do those value add, to be a business partner. And can you explain why you believe that's so important for finance and accounting to achieve, rather than just being number checkers and reporters and maybe tattletellers?
Yeah. Well, one, I think, finance ideally kind of provides, there's one thing just to provide numbers on a spreadsheet at the end of the month. Two, to me, is really, what are the granular insights, or what are the business insights that you can derive, from that. So, usually when I'm trying to do ad hoc analysis, I'm always kind of thinking about what are the, not just to get something I can put on the page, but what are the operational things that we can tease out.
Yeah.
Two, I just really like that partnership. A lot of the businesses I've been at, I've been in some true kind of headquarters locations, but as much as I can, I like to also be in the offices that have operations there, just so you can kind of see the work being done. Because I think one of the risks for being in finance is just to kind of sit at a desk, look at everything and as a number in a cell in an Excel spreadsheet.
Sure.
Where if you kind of really understand that there are people and processes and things going on that actually underlie that data, and I think getting appreciation for that, and you're kind of really digging into the details. Again, kind of getting back to why I like the mid-market, companies is, I'm actually able to, dig into things, whether it's, profitability or generating working capital, and, actually be able to really kind of dig in and find those drivers that will, and work with the teams to identify levers that will actually, move the needle for the business.
Yeah, and that's not just, it helps the business, but it also promotes your department into a higher light, which I think is really great and adds more opportunity to what you can have and what you can do as a department. So yeah, that's awesome to hear it kind of come full circle and how you explain it. So final question, and really appreciate the time today.
Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. But just final words of advice, to that, analyst, director of finance, controller, maybe staff accountant that wants to be where you are one day. Is there any advice beyond just knowing all of the technical ability they can? Is there any advice or knowledge you wish to pass on to them, or you wish you would have known at an earlier stage in your career?
Yeah, no, I would say, be patient, be focused on the long term, be invested in lifetime learning. Again, I've had points in my career where I thought I was kind of hitting a roadblock, but was always persistent, and a lot of things that roles that seemed like challenges at the time, but I think looking back, provided specific skill sets that really helped out. So and I think just be willing to challenge yourself, and be open to new opportunities.
Yeah, don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone.
Yep,
So that's
exactly.
awesome. Scott, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
this is great.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Okay.
Thank you very much.